In fact, you give that interesting example. I have a chapter in the chapter on Islam. I give almost that example with some Muslims come up with these most weird, specious arguments to prove the divinity of the Quran. And I asked, because there's one, like for example, one proof of the divinity of the Quran is that there's no book that has ever been composed by any human being which can equal the Quran in its wisdom, in its beauty, in its splendor, in all kinds of attributes and qualities you can imagine. So there's no book that's ever been written like that. Now, to an outsider, that seems like a really absurd statement. Go to the Library of Congress, take out a lot of books that are wiser and more beautiful and more eloquent, etc., than the Quran. But to the believer, the Muslim believer, it's like I say, he has, just like somebody has a daughter who might be very ugly, but objectively to the outside world, but to that person, that child is the most beautiful child in the world. Then, if you believe that, then you will interpret your reading of the Quran just as you will interpret the actions of your beloved wife or your beloved child only in a positive way, because your prior belief in the absolute virtue or beauty of that individual or that book or that text is going to color everything else that you see about that person, but that could be very dangerous. So I definitely look. I love, as I say in the opening chapter, I still love biblical poetry. I love poetry in general, actually. So that's not reason. That's not rationality. I love beautiful music. That's nothing to do with reason or rationality. So the emotions are very important. The question is, what's the proper balance between emotion and reason, particularly when when there are negative consequences of putting reason aside in areas where they should be playing an important role.
But there are negative consequences to everything. I mean,
yep.
to cite the Torah, it doesn't say I'll give you a blessing or a curse. It says I'll give you a blessing and a curse. Everything, from your secular perspective to the believer's perspective, everything is a blessing and a curse.
So true. So therefore, what? Are you therefore saying that?
Well, you say if there are negative consequences to the fundamentalist point of view, then we have to perhaps challenge the fundamentalist point of view. But there are negative consequences to every point of view. Right.
Then you have to make a cost-benefit analysis, and therefore, in terms of when you want to challenge, you'd have to say, well, is it are the losses greater than the benefits of challenging, or the benefits of retaining the system as it is so important that you shouldn't challenge them? But I have to understand. See, also people made the argument to me, what would happen if everybody would give up their belief in orthodoxy? What would happen to Judaism? Well, there are many Jews who were raised Orthodox. Most Jews, maybe let's say maybe in the early 19th century, most Jews who might have been raised Orthodox, at least in Central Europe and Germany, 50, 60 years later, were Orthodox, because Orthodoxy became a minority in Germany in the 19th century, and that was beginning to happen also in even in Eastern Europe. I mean, it never got that far, and unfortunately, Hitler destroyed the Jews. But the notion that only if you're Orthodox somehow you have the positive benefits of religion. I mean, why is that the case? There's Reform Judaism, there's Conservative Judaism, there's Reconstructionist Judaism, there's Humanistic Judaism. There are many of the most important contributors to Jewish life in the last 150 years weren't Orthodox. So it's this notion that it's either orthodoxy or nothing. I don't buy that. And that it's only in orthodoxy that you get the moral or social or ethical benefits of Jewish tradition. I don't buy that either. So, so orthodoxy. I mean, what were the Nevi'im doing? The prophets were often critiquing the accepted theology of their day. So, should they have said, well, we shouldn't be criticizing because there are a lot of good things in the system? I think part of Judaism, part of the whole Mussar literature, is this constant self-critique and self-criticism. And, Rabbi Shor Salanta didn't say that since overall the Jewish people are living a nice life, they're traditional, etc., why do I got to write a book that criticizes their the lack of moral behavior where it's manifested or where there is an inadequate piety? Why write it? Why criticize them? Because he wants to make things better. So, as I say, criticism of Orthodox Judaism if it's valid and if the Orthodox will take it seriously, criticism of any faith system should lead to improvement, should make it better, should make it even more enhancing than what it is prior to the criticism. So I don't think that criticism is something that one should refrain from, even from something that is good. You know, what happens when you're a musician? You know, how great musicians cultivated because their teachers were constantly critiquing them. No, we want more perfection. You can do that note better. You can sound it better. Then say, well, that's very good. It's good enough. No, let's make it better. So in a certain sense, what I'm doing is taking a very traditional Jewish view of one has to constantly be self-critical in order to improve and applying it to that very group that makes those claims.
How excited are the Orthodox or those who hold, I mean, even some conservative Jews hold the Orthodox position. How excited are the holders of the traditional belief to engage in this question?
Okay, I think that they're not excited at all. I think there's a great fear of it. Again, the book deals with that. I'll give you an example of my shul. I said I come from a very open-minded rabbi and a very liberal shul where a lot of the people in shul, I'm sure, are closer to me than to the traditional Orthodox formulations. I didn't take a census, and I can't vouch for this, but I wouldn't be surprised. You can take my word or not, whatever. So we have an adult education committee, and we invite scholars and residents for weekends. So several months ago, I suggested that we invite James Kugel, right, scholar in residence. Now, Kugel, you have to understand, lived in this community for many, many years. He was a member of the congregation. He was a founder. Kugel, I don't know if you know it or not, but he's a Sephardic Jew.
Yeah.
You know that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to say I know his work. I've read his book. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Do you know that he's a Sephardic Jew?
No.
Okay, so now you know. Okay. Now you're asking, what does the name Kugel got to do with that? But I'll tell you that another time. So he's a Sephardic Jew. He helped set up a Sephardic congregation in Newton Center, where I live. He is a strictly Shomer Shabbat, strictly Orthodox Jew. He doesn't even like to be called Orthoprax. He claims that he fits the definition of Orthodox. Doesn't like the term Orthodox. I'm a friend of Kugel's, and we've communicated, and we've met, and we've discussed each other's books, etc. And we've discussed this issue. So his latest book, How to Read the Bible, obviously basically accepts the overall Gadol in general validity of modern critical biblical scholarship as, the proper and appropriate way of understanding how the Bible, how the elements or the components of the Bible originated. And he taught this at Harvard for who knows how many years. Now, I don't want to get right now, unless you want to discuss that, into Kugel's theology. But anyway, so I said I think it's very important that these issues, how should Orthodox Judaism, particularly modern Orthodoxy, which claims that it's part of this Torah Umada ideology and value system, how do they deal with modern critical biblical scholarship? Because that's really what's troubled me for 40 years. So the Adult Education Committee said, hey, that's a great idea. But the rabbi felt that he preferred that we not do that because he felt, and he said, and I understand where he was coming from, he said, look, there are members of the congregation who would not be comfortable with Kugel's orientation. And the purpose of having the scholar in residence on a Shabbat is not to be divisive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've had Tamar Ross here, but so even in a liberal, modern Orthodox shul, not everybody is comfortable discussing these things openly. However, we do have in our shul itself professors of Bible. Mark Brettler, who's the editor of the Jewish Study Bible, teaches at Brandeis. One of the early founders of the shul was Nachum Sarna. So the shul has within it leading biblical scholars, and scholars of also Shai Cohen is a member of the shul, is professor of Second Temple Judaism at Harvard. So on the one hand, we have people in the shul who are clearly, accepting overall critical scholarly approaches to the Bible and to Judaism. They may not accept my particular views, about whether there's any inspiration in the Bible or not, but they're into, their livelihood is critical biblical scholarship. And they're part of the shul, and they're active in the